Good evening, welcome everyone. And today's discussion, like Dr. Soji rightly said, is around Ghana's educational system. And to help us navigate through proceedings is a distinguished person who is no stranger to most of us. She is currently head of news at TV3, and prior to that, she worked at Hallo Oil as communications manager. And for 12 years before that, at the Multimedia Network. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Jifa Beho Bampo as our moderator for today. And we are so honored to have you, Jifa. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, and then we will certainly have Professor Ernest Aite, who is a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana, but he is a fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences and the Secretary General of the Africa Research Universities Alliance. And we'll go on into learning a bit more about each and every one of our guests. So at this point, let me formally introduce Ruby Charlene Opoku. Now, she's an innovative and solutions-driven individual committed to examining the efficacy of existing policies and laying out the groundwork for new programs and legislation to meet objectives and goals. She's been actively involved in social impact activities, such as the Justice Sector Reforms Project, which she co-led with the Center for Law, Innovation Policy and other stakeholder organizations such as USAID to advocate for criminal justice reforms, legal innovation, and policy structuring to increase access and transparency in the judiciary. She's currently a public interest law and advocacy fellow that encourages research, social development, and reforms. She's also passionate about spreading STEM education. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and maths education in Ghanaian schools, and works as a teacher liaison with the Space Foundation in the United States. So let me welcome Ruby there to start off this conversation with us. Ruby Charlene Opoku, over to you.
For the lovely introduction, Ms. Bampo. Good evening, everyone. Permit me to reintroduce myself. I am Ruby Charlene Opoku, a primary beneficiary of the Free SHS policy and a graduate of Wesley Girls High School, Cape Coast. I'll be addressing the state of Ghana's secondary educational system with particular emphasis on the Free SHS policy, the current state of the policy, impact and challenges, as well as the future and aspirations it poses not only for the students but also the nation and other relevant stakeholders. Before I delve into my main agenda, I want to say a big thank you to the Center for Social Justice for this platform and this wonderful opportunity. And I also wish to acknowledge the presence of my esteemed co-panelists, Professor Ernest Aite and Dr. Foster Kweku. I'm truly honored to share this speaking platform with you, and I do hope you're able to make valuable contributions and a great impact on our dear listeners, as well as dispelling other notions or other concerns they may have by the end of the program. Our program's theme: Ghana's educational system, current state and aspirations, is of critical importance. Considering all the significant changes and developments that have been made to our educational system, particularly within the span of just 5 years since 2017, and there have been new educational interventions such as the introduction of the Free SHS policy, the introduction of the KG to B6 curriculum, and the new Common Core program for the junior high school and senior high school students. It is naturally consequential that following changes and new developments are endless questions on the relevance, future sustainability, and challenges of this educational system, as well as its impact on the nation and students and other stakeholders primarily. SHS policy aims to eliminate the elements of cost as a barrier to education, basically. And this social intervention commenced in 2017 and was largely welcomed with lots of joy on the parts of parents, students, other people who have been affected by cost being a barrier to accessing education. But there was also some doubts as to whether truly the government was not going to charge anything, like there was not going to be any additional costs in taking their kids to school. So with the first implementation of the policy, I quite remember that when we were going in for our perspectives, some of the parents were a bit skeptical and tried to ask
I've been able
if we
to.
were truly
So
not to
this
pay
can.
anything, not even PTA dues. The teachers kept insisting and reassuring us that indeed we were not supposed to pay anything. And indeed we didn't pay anything too. So that was a plus. So in subsequent years, so after the first year, people realized that the policy was indeed going on smoothly, and actually you don't have to pay anything. All you have to do is make sure that your child gets a grade and your child gets a good it's admitted into his or her school. When the child is admitted, you go for your prospectus, present the child on the day of reopening, and the government takes care of the rest of the things. And substantial things, I use substantial because I remember when we were first going to school, there were stories of people who came to school, boarding school, without anything, no troubles, no prank in other schools, and they were hoping that the government would provide that. No, the government expenditure for PSHS is limited to providing resources, paying tuition, and other relevant fees would have to pay in secondary school. Is limited beyond that. I think the parents have to contribute their quota to it. It has been greatly compromised with the inception, since the inception of the program. Okay, so first and foremost, with respect to resources, the government provided core textbooks, strictly core textbooks. If you were offering any elective, you will not get a textbook to support you for that elective. It's either you try and get some for yourself, or maybe you stick to teachers note, but try and find a way of helping yourself out with the electives. But the government strictly provided for core subjects, and with students who would not be able to afford textbooks, it became a bit worrisome, because it's either they'll have to always depend on their mates who were able to be fortunate, or they would have to wait and inherit some of the textbooks from seniors who are leaving the school. There was also the issue where most of these textbooks provided contained erroneous information. I think so far, one book which was really good was the social studies book, but for the inter science book in particular, especially the past questions too that they also provided, most of the answers were wrong. And it's not that we look at the answers for because you are lazy, or we are just looking for the answer straight away. But sometimes when you want to do self-evaluation, okay, and you are trying to get to see the correct answers to your questions, most of these past questions provided were wrong, and you, unless you have other textbooks or other resources to cross check, then you'll be fine. And there was also the issue of limited contact hours that also affected the quality of the system. When we went to school, we were having the 3 semesters, yes, sorry, 3 terms, sorry. And in the 3 terms, we had more contact hours. The teachers were able to take their time to take us through the various subjects, and yes, understanding was clear. But with the introduction of the semester system, there was limited contact hours and there was more vacation. So if you go on vacation, you really have to make sure that you learn, or you try and find a way or develop your own study habits, so that you'll be able to cover up some of the semester topics before you go back to school. And other people also resorted to vacation classes, but with the issue of vacation classes, it's more of a majority wins the day or majority rules the day. Because if, let's say, they are asking a question on who has gotten to maybe inequalities in mathematics, and maybe two people have gotten there, then more people have gotten to sets, they'll start from sets. They wouldn't go back to inequalities and try to teach you. So that was how vacation classes operated. Okay, then there was also the fact that education in Ghana is largely theoretical. Okay, there is less practice to it, but with the introduction of the policy, especially at the senior high school level, it became worse. It became worse because I never had practicals in senior high school for integrated science. And I know we are supposed to have integrated science practicals because I came from a private school and we used to have lots of practical sessions during our integrated science. So I was wondering, and I've been wondering, what if someone was not fortunate to come from a background like mine where I've had integrated science practicals? So at least, even though I'm just looking forward to having them in the senior high school, at least I have a background or I have experience to rely on in case I want to remember this scientific principle. But what if about the person who has just read it, has never experienced it, and is supposed to describe the practical part? All she knows is that, oh, if let's say you have to mix this making you have to mix this chemical or something, you just use this step 1, step 2, step 3. The person has never done it before, and that is very, very dangerous to the students. This generally makes learning very difficult, because if you're always supposed to rely on what it's written and you don't practice anything, what's going to stick in your head? And it's also, you must also take into consideration that there are students who learn through practicals. So when there is lack of practicals or inadequate practical sessions with students, it causes teaching and learning to become very difficult for some people. It's sort of like, may the best person who is good at theoretical minds understand this and let's move on, rather than let's go, if you don't understand the theory, let's go to the practical, maybe you'll be able to understand something from there. In other schools, sharing instances where there was low motivation amongst the teachers. Apparently, even when students are paying fees, some of the teachers still do not really come to class. But with the inception of the free SHS policy in their schools, they said it became worse. Okay, sometimes you wouldn't see the teacher for 2 or 3 weeks, and when they finally come to class, they pass subtle comments such as, we are using our taxes to pay for it. Was they really felt uncomfortable with the actions of the teachers. And I also remember at a point in time in Wesley Girls, for Gold Track, they didn't have science teachers for some time. I think for more than a month after they had come to school, they did not have integrated science teachers, and they were relying on the government to provide these science teachers, but they never really came about. So the students really had to depend on textbooks, try to find notes from other classes who had had integrated science lessons, and they tried to catch up as much as they could, or as fast as they could, before the exams came off. Greatly affected the policy was the problem of inadequate facilities. So most of these schools have their limits, and with the free SHS policy, with certain batches, there were double the number of students coming into the school. Okay, and it put so much pressure on the facilities, and it became very, very worrisome, because sometimes there were people who didn't even have classrooms in other schools. Some people too had to sleep on the floor. It happened in my school because the beds were not sufficient anymore. So they had to make new beds for them, and it even had to take the school had to work around the clock to make sure that these children were not sleeping on the floor. But with this situation, the government has been trying and working around the clock to remedy it, because as of the time I was leaving high school, I remember the government was putting up a senior high school block For Kateko, the government has been able to put up a 12-unit classroom block to supplement the existing classroom so that they'll be able to accept more students for the pre-SHS policy, and it's happening in other schools, and that is very commendable. And also with the issue of disorganization in terms of the academic calendar, even till date, it's still happening. Okay, so I remember we were supposed to report to school and in August 2019. The date for reporting had not been properly communicated. The government had not really told us anything. Then on 19th August, there's a news report where people are in school, some are home. Lots of us were home because we didn't know whether we were even supposed to go to school or we were supposed to stay at home. The government had to release a new date, and it was a whole lot. And the most annoying one that happened last year was when Form 3s were supposed to report to school in April. And just that morning, after people have driven hours to Cape Coast, to other places to drop their children, then the government came to inform them that the students should go back home and return a month later. And considering the economic challenges being faced in the countries at the moment too, it was very inconsiderate of the government to also do that. There are instances to where some of the students, they vacate on Monday, then they are supposed to come to school on Wednesday. It's really worrisome. So I hope that now that the double track system has ended, they'll be able to address that and increase the contact hours between students and teachers, because such a beautiful policy should not be damaged by the little challenges like this. They are great, but I feel that if with proper planning, you'll be able to remedy it. And I'm excited that the government has taken the step to ensure that they are going to have a review of the policy, and I believe that they are going to produce better results for us. And in conclusion, it is noteworthy that every nation's growth and development are heavily dependent and influenced by the kind of structural makeup of the educational system in place. Education is critical to a country's development, and all developmental advances from medical discoveries and agricultural interventions to effective state administration and private sector growth are made possible by human intellect. Therefore, the need to empower people and to ensure that quality is preserved at all times must be considered. And I hope and I trust that the free SHS policy will be quickly reviewed and we'll be able to see the proposals that the government would come in. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Ruby, for that. I didn't realize that it was going to be a video presentation. So Ruby put this video presentation together on her aspect of the issues that she was going to be talking about, but she will join for the main session later on. So don't worry, you will get to hear from her. So she was speaking about free SHS policy and implementation perspectives of I beg your pardon, sorry, I went off. So I was just saying that I'm going to give you a little brief about the free SHS policy. So the free SHS policy started in 2017, and initially it came up as a double track policy. As of this academic year, the double track has been phased out. As of July 2021, the president, Nana Akufo-Addo, indicated that 1.6 million students had benefited from the free SHS program. And so certainly we'll be having more numbers because those numbers were as of July 2021. Free SHS remains the route through which many underprivileged, underserved, and poorer communities and people have access to post JHS education, and it gives them a leg up to get into tertiary education, whether it's at the teacher training, whether it's at the university, whether it's even at the technical universities. It broadens the opportunity for those who otherwise would not have had an opportunity to go to school. But in listening to Ruby, it throws up some of the challenges of the policy, having the right infrastructure in place, having the quality of teachers that would really impact students such that they would do well enough to move to the next stage. Also impacting the implementation, the expenditures, the fundings that are needed, not just for infrastructure, but for books and other equipment and requirements to make the free SHS program a success. And then additionally, of course, the schools, because they will have to support the students' boarding, feeding, teaching and learning, extracurricular activities. All these are required to be free. And that also puts some pressure on the school heads and the schools in general in being able to deliver on these things. So that's Ruby's perspectives. I'm sure there are lots you would like to ask her once she comes in. So at this point, let me introduce Dr. Kwao. Dr. Foster Kwao joins us. Hello, Doc, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. And do we have Mr. Asamoah as well?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. That's Bokassa, isn't it?
Yes, please.
All right. So Bokassa is a famous maths teacher from Achimota School. So you're welcome as well. Thank you both as well for joining us. I'm being asked to turn on my video, but I don't know how stable everybody's internet is, because sometimes when one person's internet comes up, it disrupts other people's internet. So I'll turn it on, but I just hope that it doesn't disturb other people's internet. So in a moment, I'll just switch that on as well. But let me welcome Dr. Foster Kwao, who is a physician specialist at the 37 Military Hospital, and then also Mr. Asamoah, popularly known as Bokassa, who is a maths teacher, housemaster, former member of the Achimota School management team. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for inviting us.
So first, I want to ask you, Dr. Kwao, the free SHS system, you have a child in the system, am I correct?
That is correct.
What year is the child in, or are they completed?
So they are now currently in Form 2. They just completed Form 1.
All right, so tell us a bit about what the experience has been like for you.
Well, 1 year of, we'll say, free SHS with my little girl. It's not been entirely very smooth, but before I go, let me say that I'm grateful for this inviting me to be part of this great conversation. As you already said, I work at the military hospital. I have a ward who is now currently in Form 2. They have just vacated and they're at home now. So back to the question that you asked. So 1 year is not been entirely very smooth, in terms of, we'll say, so many things, just like Ruby indicated in her video, things to do with uncertainties with reporting dates at school and when kids will vacate and come home. Sometimes you are just there and then a call will come through that, oh, they are vacating maybe a week or more ahead of the official vacation dates. So that is, so the child gets to do very frequent trips to school in, let's say, 2-3 months. They are going up and down, and unfortunately she's not in Accra. And so then the challenge of having to move a car or get her up and down was one aspects of it that I really didn't really like at all. She herself comes home and will complain about the kind of food that is served. Yes, we have all been to secondary school before, and we all know that, yes, it's not always very palatable and in terms of even the quantity of food. But from the way she complains, I get the impression that the food is so scanty, and at a point he even indicated that sometimes like they are fed close, you can even say twice a day, you know, and that was really very frustrating. And so every now and then we have to send her food, yes, to make up. Yes, well, I said, we've all been in secondary schools before, and usually when you load your chop box, yes, it will carry you through to the midterms, and yes, your parents will come and refill it for you. But every now and then we really had to send her food to probably make up for her nutrition. So with regards to the uncertainties with reopening and vacation dates and the food aspects, and at the time, you know, they were, I mean, the double track system. And even with the double track system, you could tell that they were still too many for the infrastructure they had at school. And so, you know, they had to more or less, as Ruby indicated, you know, take turns to do certain things. And that was really very frustrating for me. For me, the most important aspect of all this is the fact that, as Ruby rightly indicated, even with the double track system, which meant that a certain number or a certain half were at home and then the other half were in school, there were still too many for the teachers. And so, for example, in their school, they have 15 science classes. So science 1 to science 15, on the average about 35 people per class. And so if they, at the time that they were doing a double track, it meant that half would be in school, maybe science 1 to science 6 classes. And if there's only one physics teacher or one chemistry teacher or one math teacher, mathematics teacher, you wonder how they will be able to go around all these 6. And they are not even the only people who will be probably doing, let's say, a subject like maybe core maths. And so such a teacher will be stretched. And so they had really very limited teaching. I'm saying this all from the things that she told me. Very, very limited teaching. And what also seemed to have made it worse was that at the time, the attention shifted also to the final years, because they had also gone through this double track, had difficulties with year 1, year 2 in terms of contact time with their teachers. And so they needed to spend a lot more time on them in year 3 to get them ready for the exams. And so once attention shifted, you see that year 1 and year 2 were disadvantaged. And so, as Ruby indicated, very little teaching seemed to have gone on. And for me, that was really very frustrating. Yes, I know that, well, when we were also in school, and we would say our numbers probably wasn't as great as we have now. Yes, occasionally we'll have challenges with teachers. Okay, so what it means now that you have so many of them in school now at the same time, and unfortunately the teacher numbers has not really greatly improved, we are going to have challenges. So for now, these are the very 3 or 4 difficulties or challenges or frustrations that I've had in this last 1 year.
So in terms of the environment, it's not been an easy one. Certainly it's been a challenging one, but one also has to find out how the teachers have been coping with this. And this reminds me of sometime in 1994, when we shifted from the A-level system to the JHS senior high school system, when we started receiving the first batch of senior high school students and some of the chaotic experiences that emerged, because now we were running, a parallel system. Sometimes they were in school longer than we were. Sometimes we came to school ahead of the SHS students at that time. So it was really also a different time. Let me bring on Mr. Samoa. Let me just call him Bokassa, then I think we'll all be free. So Bokassa, I know that you have that experience as well. And that's almost what? Almost 20 something, 30 years ago. What's the difference between that time and maybe now?
Thank you very much, Jiva. And your math is still working. You're able to calculate the number of years.
Great.
Right, so it's and for the organizers, I'm grateful. It's a real honor for me to be on this platform and to speak. And I'm hoping that I'll be forgiven if I say things that people don't like. And I wish everybody the best. To compare that time to now, I think it will not be fair because situations are different and times are different. But for me as a teacher, my biggest challenge with any implementation has been with the way the teachers are either notified or involved in the system. And I was wishing that if the implementers had involved the teachers and made them aware of what they're supposed to do and really focused on developing them and their capacity, it would have had a better outcome. But before I even continue with that, I'm a firm believer in the free SHS system. I always tell people this, that my senior brother, Stephen, was so brilliant in school, much, much, much better than me. But because of money, he wasn't able to go to secondary school. And I've seen a lot of kids who are so good, but because of money, they couldn't go. Myself, I was just lucky. I was just fortunate that when I went to Achimota school, at some point I couldn't pay my fee. In fact, to tell the truth, the first 2 years I couldn't pay my fees, but the school never sacked me. I don't know why, and probably that saved me. And so the free SHS is very good. It's very good in terms of access. It's very good in terms of getting almost everyone who is interested to develop themselves. The only problem is that if you want to increase access, is it going to affect the quality? And for me, I think the quality has been affected drastically, and something must be done about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samoa. And I'm glad that you indicate that free SHS is a very important policy, one that will obviously help many people who hitherto may not have been able to go to secondary school. And I know one of the main policies of the president is that we should have an educated society with each person that has no less than a high school leaving certificate from the senior high school level. So that's really his ambition. And in recent times, when there have been calls to review the program because of Ghana's current economic challenges, he directed cabinet that they can review everything else except the free senior high school program. So that's going to continue. But you talk about quality being affected, Mr. Samoa. Is it quality because now there are too many students and the teachers, such as yourselves, being as good as you are unable to cope? Or is it that the additional teachers brought on to support the students and the schools are not as good as some of you or as qualified as you are?
Okay, saying that some teachers are good and others are not good. I don't normally go there. But
okay, I can revise it and just say that.
What
seems to be the challenge then when it comes to quality? Because many of us are products of the outputs that is what the teacher has done for us. Some are brilliant, but you also need a teacher to inspire, to drive, to motivate.
Okay, so the point is this: even before this free SHS came, the quality of teaching was going down. And everybody agrees to that. It was going down. It wasn't like it was, I look back to my teachers who helped me to even speak English. I still remember my English teacher, Mrs. Say, there are certain words I couldn't put. I wasn't good, but her desire to help me improve, I saw that through in almost all my teachers. But having been in the education system since, let's say, 1990, I've realized that gradually the quality of the teaching and the teachers is going down. And so, or has been going down, and no one can deny that. But then, so when we're going to implement the policy, they should have taken that into account, and then probably should have found a way to prop up the quality of teaching. So then you bring all these numbers in, okay? You bring all these numbers in, people are struggling to hold on to their quality, and then all these numbers that you cannot, and then like Charlene said, the dates, and then it throws everything overboard. And as teachers, you model certain things. Now, if you are struggling to hold on to your quality, right, and then I use the word impose these numbers on you where you cannot even plan. Nobody can even say that you are not good enough anymore. Now you can actually blame the system. If no one can hold the teacher responsible, you can say that it's because of the system. It's because there are too many students. It's because the opening days are bad. There are no textbooks. Charlene said it. They had core textbook, but they have letter textbook. How do you go to school and it's free, and then you are supposed to buy an Akiola EMAT textbook, and you don't have the money to buy it? How can a teacher take one textbook and use it to teach the other students? So I think that the quality discussion was already there. We already have a problem with it, but the numbers that were brought, and then the timing and the way it was managed, I would say that the logistical support and leadership support for the scheme wasn't good enough, and that helped or pushed the quality further down. I hope I'm making my point clear.
Yes, I think that's quite clear. Dr. Foster-Quao, you've heard what a teacher like Bokassa, he was one of really the best maths teachers in his time in Achimota School while I was there. And certainly there are many other good teachers like him as well, not just in Achimota, but in Wesley Girls and a lot of our schools in the country. What bothers you beyond the issues you raised about maybe the quality of the food, the erratic timetable? I mean, do you have concerns about the teaching and the learning?
Certainly, I mentioned that in the case of where my ward is, the numbers are so many to the extent that you have 15 science classrooms for year one. Okay, and I was making the point that if we have only one or two, let's say, mathematics teachers, I'm just wondering how they will be able to go around and do effective teaching. Just even assume that half are at home and half are in school per the track system. And let me say that now what is being practiced is that now we are not practicing the double track system now. What they are doing now is that we are only keeping 2-year groups in school at a time, and the one of the year groups will be at home, which still means that we can't have all 3-year groups in school at a time. Certainly, still indicating or suggesting that we have a lot of infrastructural challenges. So it's not like the double track system has stopped, and so then everything is being solved. No, we are still doing some form of a shift system, sort of, to be able to make use of the facility. So back to the teaching bit of it, I think that the numbers are too much. And so time spent with the children is very small, limited. And as Mr. Asamoah indicated, I also remember that the government also employed some new teachers. Now you ask yourself, are these fresh teachers? Is it from the colleges, or anybody just applies after you finish your first degree? What experience do they have in teaching? And so just throwing them into the classrooms, have you oriented them very well? Do they know the books they are going to use? Are they familiar with how they are supposed to teach the children for them to understand. Teaching is an art, and it has to be learned and learned well. So you just can't enter a classroom, pick a book, and pretend to be teaching. So we can't continue, for me, to deceive ourselves. And as Mr. Samuel already said, which I agree to, the free SH policy is excellent. If only we can re-look at it and we can re-engineer it and make it better for all of us. As he said, yes, there are so many people out there. And yes, I have relatives who were also not able to go to school just simply because they were not able to pay school fees. And so why not? Once the government is paying, that is great. We are only saying that the system can be improved. And so once we can re-look at it again and look at this teaching aspect, and as he also rightly said, this aspect of teaching, or let me just say generally, the quality of our education, the standards started falling a long time ago. And this seemed to have just made it a little worse. And so once we can revisit the style of teaching, and he's a teacher, so I know, and once it's popular, I get the impression that he's a great teacher. And he can say that it didn't come just in one day. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of skill, and over some period of time, you really acquire the skills and the strategies to make your student understand what subject you want to teach. And so, just employing quick people, this fast track employment that we did and getting them into the classrooms, I don't think that will help. And so if we can, take a few steps back, get our teachers trained, the books available, and allow this free SHS to take off very well. I think that is a great idea, it's a great policy, and we are going to get a lot out of it as a country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that perspective, Dr. Quao. Is there anything you would like to say, Bokassa, before I move the conversation along?
Yes. Doctor was talking about the fast track employment of teachers to come to the classroom. And I remember one example where someone who had done, they call it BCom, Business Commercial Art, was brought to a school, or sent to and he left after maybe about 2 months because he couldn't cope with it. And then again, what I would want, all the talking that we have done so far, we have left out the administration part of the schools. So Charlene was about students, myself and Doc are about teachers, but the link between the students and the teachers is the administration of the school. And it's something that I think that is missing in all the discussions. But that's where I want to take up. I want to take it from, that part is probably more important than the students and then the teachers. Because if the administrators of the schools are not able to link, the two, the teaching, the teachers and the students and the learning, and even the challenges, someone may want to prepare some food for you, and you may not have all the ingredients, but if they are a master chef, they're able to put one or two together and they can give you a food that you think is the correct one. So we may be having we may have challenges with the implementation and everything, but I think that sometimes the leadership of the schools are also actually not discussed. And that's something that we should discuss. They should be discussed more than the teachers and then the students. If the leadership is discussed and they are made to know what they are supposed to do, or they are equipped, I think this, how many years? Since 2017. So we're about 5 years now. I think we could have been if the leadership of the schools were properly equipped, properly led, and then trained, if I should put it that way, to be able to take the teachers and the teaching and then the students and the learning and put together to create something nice for all of us.
Thank you very much. And I think that's a very instructive point. And in my career as a journalist, one of the most difficult things is getting administrators who work in the government setup to be candid and open about what their challenges are it invariably leads to victimization. A lot of them are either sanctioned in one form or the other. So it's always difficult to get them to be part of these conversations, usually then, unless you get the unions. But yes, that's quite significant as well.
Can I quickly jump in?
Come in.
There's sometimes these administrators hide behind they'll be victimized. It's the way you couch your language. You can say the same thing a different way, and then there'll be no loophole for you to be held and then squeezed or something. And I think most of these administrators, most of them is incompetent. They hide behind the incompetence and say that if I do this, the government, if I do, the government will do that. I disagree. I disagree with that.
Okay, you're welcome to the. Oh, no, it's. I think it's good. That's what we want. We welcome all of you to the 10th edition of the CSJ Leadership Dialogue Series. My name is Jifa Bampo, and we've been having a short dual interaction with Dr. Foster Kwao, who is a physician specialist at the 37 Military Hospital. He has 2 children in the free SHS system now. And then, of course, you heard Mr. SNEB Asamoah, who is a former mathematics tutor at Shimota Senior High School. And he's also a former member of the management for the school. Earlier, we heard Ruby Charlene Opoku. She's a free SHS graduate. She's a law student. She will join us later. But if any of you have any comments or any questions, it will be good to put them in the question box or in the chat box, and we can read them out to you. But I can spare 5 minutes. So if anyone has a question they want to ask, I can give 2 people that opportunity right now if they want to raise any questions or any issues for Dr. Kwao or for Bokassa. Any takers? You can use the, you raise your hand icon for the Zoom call, and I'll see you. Okay, so there's someone called Pedersen or Pedersen, I'm not sure. Is there any other person before I proceed? Okay, so I can't see a second person, so I'll take you, Pedersen. Please go ahead with your question quickly. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you. I think I just wanted to make a comment. And I think most of the, okay, by way of introduction, I'm a PTA chair in one of the secondary schools. And I think the most difficult aspects of the free SHS have been the assumption that everything has been absorbed. I mean, everybody here knows the involvement of the PTA in the development of almost all the schools we have, both the endowed and the less endowed. And this pretends that everything has been taken care of. This voluntary sense given to parents that you may choose to participate with PTA activities or not is hurting the program. Because a lot of the times, and let's face it, as was said, even remittances to the school from government delays. As we speak, most of the schools have challenges with even desks to sit on, classrooms to be in. And there are a lot of schools where PTA has contributed. Now, if we have this impression that everything is fine and parents should just send the children to school, it's one of the areas where we are having a huge deficit in terms of the challenges that have been mentioned. But that said, the concept is okay, but we should take a look at it and allow all those who want to assist in whatever form to do so, and do so voluntarily, compulsorily. And this free thing, I mean, somebody must pay for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pedersen, for your perspective. And I think that's also an important one. There have been instances where parents want to pay something in addition just to assist the school because they can see that the schools are struggling or the school heads are under some pressure. But because the rule is that PTAs are not supposed to pay anything beyond what are prescribed and approved, sometimes people can even go and report the school head if parents agree to pay something. So that's something that certainly needs to be looked at as a policy issue from government, because it gives an impression that they want to show everything is okay, when in reality, it's not. Anybody else want to make a quick point? If not, I have a question. This one says, if parents like Dr. Powell are asked to pay so that those people who can't truly afford have free SHS, what will his reaction be? So Dr. Powell, that's a question for you. If the position where we have free SHS, however, if you're a parent in a certain privileged, with a privileged background where you can afford to pay for your ward, will you be willing to pay? So just have that question in mind. And then this other question says, what was the advantage of switching to the JSS and SSS system? Was it really necessary? And I think that's a question that Bokassa can answer as well. So I'll start with you, Dr. Powell. You can answer that question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that this, was even suggested even by the finance minister some time back when the current
All right, when the issue came up, I think
exactly.
Yes.
And I support him 100%. Yes, I've been paying my little girl's school fees since she was 2 years old, and she only has 3 critical years, and then she goes to the university. Why would I want to compromise these 3 critical years? And so if I have to pay and certainly take the burden of some other parents so that, yes, government can concentrate on the less privileged, or let's just say that those who will not be able to pay, once we can work things out properly and identify those groups of people, why not? I'll be willing to pay. I'll continue to pay so that government continues to spend on the rest. The point is that, and just like the president rightly said, the more of us who are educated, the better. And so we can educate everybody up to a certain level. I mean, I think that we should all go for it. And if parents have to contribute in a way to make that happen, I mean, I think that most parents will be willing to do that. And I personally will be willing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Powell. Bokassa, your thoughts, because at least you've had the unique perspective of seeing some of us transition out of the old system, which was the O-level, A-level, and then the SSS system coming in. Someone is asking, then what was the advantage of switching to the JSS and SSS, which was later on changed, obviously, to JHS and SHS? Was it necessary? What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you very much. I remember when they were doing the promo to switch from the O-level, A-level to the JHS, SHS. I still remember them telling us that when you finish JHS, you can do your own painting. If there's something that's broken in your home, you'll be able to fix it because they're going to teach the children practical things. So it was almost like if you finish JHS, you can even get a job as a mason or a carpenter or something. But it didn't work that way. And I think that, in my opinion, with hindsight, nothing has changed. It's still the same, like Charlene said, theories. You go to school, all we do is that you teach theory, things that are practical, you teach them by theory, and then students go and write an exam. Even WAEC gives a paper practicals. So you don't do the practicals, but you go and write a paper where the practicals on paper. So in my opinion now, and looking back, it wasn't necessary. But the idea at that time, I think it was PNDC time, yes, to try and get the children to have some skills. But we didn't follow through, and we've gone back to square one. And then we come back for another reforms. And if we are not careful, it's the same story.
Let's take some other questions and then we'll wrap up this session. This one says, has the introduction of the teacher license exams contributed to the effective implementation of the free SHS policy? Has it affected the number of teachers in our schools? So that would be for you, Bokassa. This one says, parents like me are grateful internally for your contribution to my children way back in the 90s as one of the maths teachers for their vacation classes. Oh, so okay, so that's for you, Bokassa, as well. Someone said, good to see the face of Bokassa finally. And another person also sent a similar message. Good to hear you speak, Mr. Samoa. You made such a huge impression on my children in Achimota School. God bless you. So I guess you are receiving your platitudes at this time. So that's great. So okay, tell us, what are your thoughts about the question?
I'm humbled by all the comments that people are making. I just want them to know that in life, we all have roles to play. So it was my time to play that role. And if I did it well, I thank God for that. But I'm actually having this program. There's a headmaster sitting by me, just opposite me. So he's listening to it. So when you're asking the question about the teacher license and whether it's helping, he was waving at me to say, no, it's not helping. So I'm just giving you, this is a teacher who just passed his promotion exam about a week ago, and we were jubilated and celebrate, but he's saying that it is not helping. So I'm not the one saying it. He just got his promotion to a deputy director of education. He's saying that it's not helping. So that's my simple answer to that.
Give us just some quick perspectives about what it will take to probably improve the quality of teachers, or what it will take to improve general quality for the free SHS, so that many whose children are going into the system will not be conflicted about putting their children through.
Thank you, Jifa. It's the leadership of the schools. The leadership of the schools will have to be serious, they have to be candid. And sometimes, and when then I've moved from there to the Ministry of Education and the GES. I think they just talk, but they don't act the talk. So right from the school level to the GES level to the education level, nobody's really living the talking that they are doing. And so the teacher is an employee. The student is just a learner. In between them are the leaders who are supposed to implement these things. And so it has to come from them. So everybody talks about the teacher, but if you have a headmaster, headmistress who knows the job and is trying to rally, he's able to get the weak teacher to come up a bit. And then the next goes and goes. So for me, I'll just make it very simple. It's the leadership of the schools and of the GES and of the Ministry of Education. And we have to hold them responsible. There should be a system that holds all these people responsible. One of the things that even happens, and it's not just this government, you realize that when a government comes into power, then most of the teachers or heads who have gone for these promotional interviews and are qualified in terms of ranks, and they belong to a particular party, then they are being pushed to schools. So you can see someone has the qualification as a head, but it's not qualified in terms of training. If you go to his background, his or her background, and check their classrooms, their lessons, what they've not been doing it. And because they now have someone influential in government, a person takes them to the place and then they just mess it up. So if you ask me, this is my answer. We should hold the leadership of the teachers and then the Ministry of Education and GES responsible. If they put their acts right and they act what they are saying, we should not have problems. The problems will be there everywhere. Even the advanced country, there are problems in education. But the leadership of these countries are able to put things together to get us to, for the students to benefit or the generation to benefit. But for me, I work with 7 heads of schools in my career as a teacher. And I can tell you that the biggest challenge or the biggest thing to improve in a school, to get schools to function properly, is the leadership.
Thank you very much, Bokassa. And Bokassa, please stay with us if you can, because there's still lots more questions, but we have to truncate this at this time. Dr. Kwao, I'll give you a final word, and then I will introduce our next speaker.
So, in a few ways, I just wanted to say that, yes, we are I think, like this free SH policy, and I think that we should do everything that we can to make it work and work very well. If it does, yes, it will go a very long way to more or less, well, you can say, deliver this country out of, well, the poverty and the other problems and challenges that we face. If we can address the infrastructural problems, if we can address the teacher numbers and let's just say that the quality of teaching. And I am not an expert in education, but then we need practical teaching, so teaching that makes the child very innovative, teaching that makes the child be able to remember and not to memorize. So you can figure things out, you can really turn things around. Not too long ago, just the candidates, or let's just say the gentlemen and ladies who were able to win the Brilliant Science and Maths quiz, I think they traveled outside and were exposed to other colleagues at their level, and they were asked to carry out a certain challenge. And the reports were that the Ghanaians were really way back because they couldn't really do the practical aspects of the question. And so
there's no KK, but there's okay.
So I think that we should address the infrastructure challenges, and if we do that, to help. If we address the teaching, and if we look at the content itself and the style of teaching, it will go really a long way to help this country. Thank you very much. The world is really not waiting for us. I mean, we are so way behind, and we need to find a way of catching up. Yes, the free SHS system will help us catch up. And once we can do that really very well, I think that Ghana will be the big winner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwao, for your perspectives, and many thanks also to Bokassa for sharing thoughts with us. I know some of you have asked some questions. For instance, there was a question about means testing. I think we should let the main speaker speak, and then I think that will add on to the quality of answers that we'll be able to give to some of the questions. Amwako Nwama, if you don't mind, let's take your question after our main speaker has addressed us. So I'll just quickly do a short introduction of our main speaker, who is Professor Ernest Aite. He's a fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's the Secretary General of the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, and a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana, which is known as the Premier University in Ghana. Now, prior to his appointment as Vice Chancellor, he was a Senior Fellow and Director of the Africa Growth Initiative at the Brookings Institution, Washington, D.C. He was also a Director of the Institute for Statistical, Social, and Economic Research, ISSA, of the University of Ghana, Legon, for the period of February 2003 to January 2010. He's an economist and has a plethora of publications to his name. He is the president of the Old Achimota Association, a position he's held since 2015 and was re-elected to that position in 2018. At this point, let's welcome our main speaker, Professor Ernest Aite, who will be speaking on the topic Ghana's education system, current state, and future aspirations. Professor Aite, thank you very much for making some time for us. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Ajifa. Let me try to share my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me begin also by thanking Dr. Soji Tete for inviting me to join you in this discussion. We all agree that it's a very important discussion that must take place. For too long, as Ghanaians, we've shied away from dealing with important matters that affect all of us. in this particular manner. So I think the platform is appropriate for the purpose, and I'm happy to be with you. Today, there are a couple of main messages that I want to deliver in this. The very first one is that secondary education in Ghana is becoming less and less competitive. And I'll be showing you exactly how this lack of competition is occurring. A lot of what the previous panelists mentioned are good anecdotes to that lack of competition in our secondary education. And I make the point that this can threaten social cohesion in the future and undermine national development. I think our first speaker made or mentioned the fact that she was worried about what all of this meant for young people in terms of career, and what this would mean for the national economy itself. And then as a result of challenges with the economy, what this would mean for social cohesion. So in my talk this evening, I will describe the structure of the system. I'll talk about its performance, and then I'll focus quite a bit on tackling the challenges of the system before concluding. One point that I'll be making throughout this is the fact that you need to do something about how our schools are governed. If we don't do something about how our schools are governed, the likelihood that we'll be able to solve these challenges or tackle these challenges will be extremely low. So for me, school governance, which would include the leadership that Bukasa spoke about, but it goes well beyond the leadership of the schools. It includes the teachers, and it includes the Ghana Education Service, and it includes the Ministry of Education. There are many stakeholders. In my view, the education system has been held to ransom by many different interest groups. It is the problem that has been caused by interest groups that have dominated making of education policy in this country. And until we take away the power of these interest groups, we are not going to make much progress in this area. So let me talk briefly about the evolution of the structure that we have. You know, this structure has evolved from many attempts in the past. The first one that I recall is a committee that was put in place soon after the overthrow of the first Republican regime that we had. So this one was chaired by Professor Alex Papon, and it recommended modifying what we had as the middle school system to introduce continuation schools. There were some experiments made soon after that, but it didn't really take off. Then we had the Jobo Committee that criticized the concept of the continuation schools, and in their place proposed a 3-year post-primary system called GSS, and then a 2-year senior secondary lower, and then another 2-year senior secondary higher in preparation for university. So basically, maintaining a 7-year post-basic education system before entering the university, but broken into 3 different tranches. In 1987, the PNDC introduced the 3-year GSS, which later on became modified to JHS, and then a 3-year senior secondary or SSS, which also became the SHS. The Kufuor government introduced, in addition to this, a 2-year preschool system as part of the basic system. And today, we have the structure being maintained, but with the introduction of free SHS, which we've heard quite a bit about this evening. What is important is that in all of these, and I maintain this, in all of these changes in the policy that we've seen, we've seldom paid attention to what the big picture is supposed to be, what we really, you know, in 1987, before we introduced the GSS and the SSS system, everybody spoke about the need to reform the system, the need to reduce the number of years spent in school and so on. the main thing driving that change at the time was the cost. The reforms that we undertook in 1987 were simply to make it affordable for government. That was all. It wasn't about making it more responsive. It wasn't about getting better educated children. Yes, we heard a bit about it, but the main motivation was to reduce the amount of money spent by the state on education. So if we are not seeing the best of results, it's simply, in my view, a result of the fact that the motivation has often been less than adequate. So as a result of these, the evolution that I've just described, we have a system in place which provides at the top of the tertiary system, made up of the universities, the polytechnics, technical universities, professional institutes, and so on. And then we have the second cycle, which is largely driven by the senior high school system, and then the junior high school system. And then you have at the bottom of it the primary or basic, where interest is largely in basic literacy, numeracy, science, and social studies. So this is the structure, and you have on the left side of this panel here, the ages that you expect people to be at each level of the system, and how long they are expected to be there. So you spend 6 years pursuing your primary education, and you do 3 years junior high, 3 years senior high, and then 4 years at the tertiary level mostly. Now, what are some of the characteristics of the system that we have today? As a result of all the different changes that have been mentioned, one thing that you can see, the access to basic and secondary levels of education has improved significantly. So today, and this has already happened just overnight, it's been going on for the past 2 decades, gentle improvements. So the gross enrollment ratio for 2019-2020, we saw the improvement up to from 86.1% to 104.84% for basic. So we have seen that for a period, these improvements have been taking place. But I also say that the increased access has not been matched with corresponding resources. So the story that our first speaker gave us with her experience from Wesley Girls is very typical. It's not confined to only Wesley Girls. You will find in all the other schools, whether they are grade A schools or something lower, you find that situation. So the pupils or the students perform poorly in national examinations. As a result of that, I'll be giving you some results to show. The National Education Assessment in basic schools and WASSCE at the secondary level, yes, there are improvements there, but still at a level lower than can be or is required. Then we talk about teacher supply and teacher motivation are a problem, especially in rural areas. And that's something that Bukasa also emphasized, and I agree entirely. When you've seen, very often we have difficulty as a public accepting the fact that the teaching that takes place in our schools is in many situations quite poor. And and if that is a problem, you can't expect much to come out of the system. So here I show the gross secondary school enrollment ratio in Ghana. We've seen the improvements that took place from 2008, steadily climbing, so that by 2018, we saw very, very significant improvements in the system there. So yes, access to secondary education has improved and has been improved over time. To what extent has the free SHS facilitated that? The improvements began taking place before the free SHS came. One can argue that in 2018, we saw the peaking of it, could have been due to the free SHS, but we saw in 2019 a sharp drop, or some drop in the amount. What could be explaining that? But clearly, it's important to accept that access to secondary education in Ghana or senior high school education in Ghana has been improving over time. But how, even though it's been improving over time, here I compare the situation to what you find in other Commonwealth African countries. So even Ghana has about 66.6, and then you have countries like Kenya and Lesotho, Mauritius, Namibia, so way above that. South Africa is above that, Swaziland is above that. Quite a number of countries in the region are doing much better than Ghana in this particular area. So yes, access is improving, but other countries in the region are doing better. Now let me talk a little bit about international comparisons. And here I'm making reference to what we call TIMSS, the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. This is a series of international assessments of the mathematics and science knowledge of students around the world. So basically you expect all young people of a certain age to be able to do comparable things. You expect them to be able to take the same mathematics and science quizzes and perform similarly. That's what you expect, because they've been through the same number of years in school. They are supposed to have been introduced to the same curriculum. They are about the same ages. So you expect them to perform in a manner that is comparable across countries. So here, let me make the point that Ghana used to participate actively in this. The last few years, in the last 5 years, we've seen no participation from Ghana, largely because it's a case of if you're not performing well, you don't want to be exposed to the rest of the world, and so you walk away from that major thing. So in this first one that I show here, this is TIMSS achievement, mathematical achievement distribution for children about age 8 or 9. Sorry, the number of years school, about 8 or 9 years in school, average age about 14.5. So basically, the ages at which we expect kids to be entering our senior high schools and so on. Now, what is interesting is the fact that for this one, this was in 2009, I think, Ghana is right at the bottom there. Ghana is right at the bottom. The only country that performed worse was South Africa in this one here. But clearly, your 14-year-old, your 15-year-old are not able to do what other 15-year-old kids are doing around the world in mathematics. This is science for the same cohort. These are for 14, 15-year-olds. Again, Ghana is right at the bottom there with South Africa and Botswana. You know, that's quite disturbing. So you go to this one here. This is the 2011 8th grade mathematics. Again, here Ghana sits right at the bottom because South Africa, I think in that year did not participate. And so there was no one to save Ghana from the last slot. And then you go to the science achievement. Again, Ghana sits right at the bottom. Now, in preparing for this, I tried to find more recent this, and I found out Ghana has stopped participating there. Clearly, we are not keen on competing, not keen on becoming globally competitive. But that's something that should worry us as a people if we want to change the structure of our economy, we want to change our society, we want to have a much more modern society, we want to face the fourth industrial revolution squarely. We've got to be worried about how we fare in the world. We've got to think about our competitiveness. Here, I present the performance of the WASSCE, which shows clear improvements for some years. So even though in the last 5 years we've seen steady improvements, what this tells me is that for something like English language, we are not doing as well as we used to do in 2011 or 2012. So what can we change? The same applies to mathematics and so on. So what can we change to ensure that even though things are getting better, there's a long way to go in order to give ourselves the assurance that we've made it. Here, I present to you Achimota School 2020 WASSCE results for core mathematics. What the point I want to make with this? Well, I've chosen Achimota School because I sit on the school board and it's my school, so nobody can tell me that I'm trying to make their school look bad. This is my own school. And since I sit on the board, I have access to the information. I got interested in this particular result largely because it shows me that only about 77.5% of the kids taking the exam, the core mathematics exam 2020, did score up to C6, and the remaining 23% failed or to get a credit in that. What it means is that about 23% of the kids that went to Achimota School were not eligible for tertiary education because of core mathematics. And that's worrying. That is worrying that you have one of supposedly best schools in the system, and you could go there and there's a high likelihood that you will not be eligible for tertiary education because of your performance in English, mathematics, or any of the requirements. Now, how do we explain the challenges of the system? Mukasa spoke about some of them. There are still a few more that we need to talk about. Dr. Kwao also mentioned a few. The first thing that I talk about is inadequate investment in schools reflected by poor infrastructure, facilities, and equipment. You know, and this is not peculiar to any one school. It cuts across the schools. The investments required to teach science in our schools is huge. It is huge. And it's not going to be made available through any public means immediately. The likelihood that it will come from a public source in the next few years, extremely low in my estimation. The second point I make is inadequate teacher preparation, often attributed to poor motivation and low morale. So our teachers are not what they used to be, according to Bukasa, and there's evidence of that. It's not just Bukasa saying it, but there's enough evidence across many schools of inadequate teacher preparation, inadequate time spent in school. And our former student mentioned that the amount of time that is devoted to interaction between, or contact hours between students and their teachers is getting shorter and shorter with time. Getting shorter and shorter with time. Students are spending less time in school. The engagement with teachers is going down. So it takes us back to the old debate of 3 years, 4 years. Which one is better? How do we resolve it? Very soon I'll talk about it in a minute. So schools focus on getting students to pass examinations mainly. So today, if you take your kid to any senior high school in Ghana, what the teachers are thinking about is how to assist that child to pass the exams. It is not about how to educate that child, but it's about passing the exams. That's how the system functions today. And some parents are happy with it, others are not. But the right discussions must take place. Do we want our kids just to pass exams or to be well-rounded citizens, knowing how to use their heads, knowing how to use their hands, knowing how to figure out how to survive as human beings? You know, the system of governance of public schools does not provide much incentive for schools to want to excel. I have no difficulty saying that there's no secondary school in Ghana, public school in Ghana, where the school board runs the school. The school boards don't run this. They don't take any important decisions. The important decisions that affect all of our schools are taken by the Ghana Education Service and by the Ministry of Education. So the people who are in the school are simply there receiving orders to run the school. What the school needs and so on is not important. It's a GES system that determines what all schools must have at a particular time. And that is a major problem for me. Now, I must say that the presentation I'm sharing with you is one that was originally shared with what we call the Alumni Alliance. There are about 40 schools, including all the schools that are represented around this event today, and many others, where we're discussing how to solve these problems. So we are all agreed that there's something wrong with the governance of our schools. We are all agreed that the school boards need to have a greater space to operate and take decisions that affect their schools. Until we do that, we are really wasting our time. So how do we deal with the poor investment? As I said earlier, there's no way the government of Ghana, even if it puts all of its resources into secondary education, can provide the things that we need to make our schools work. Today, a lot of the infrastructure that is required in schools provided by old students. It's provided by old students. Quite recently, at Chimota School, we gave the school a brand new science block. There's no way the government of Ghana can provide that or could have provided that. It can do that, but that's what we need to think about. If we are going to provide these things, how do we ensure that they can be maintained into the future? Some PPP arrangements will have to be considered. Parents and guardians will have to contribute to maintaining the infrastructure and funding of schools. Today, I've heard everybody talk about how the free SHS system is great, except for various things that they've seen wrong with it. Let me make it clear. I have no doubt in my mind that getting every Ghanaian to go to school where money is not a challenge, where money is not the obstacle, is a good idea. There's no doubt in my mind at all about it. But I also know that in the real world, there are some things that only money can do. So you can't wish away the money, and you can't. It's not going to come just like that. That's why parents and guardians. So I agree with those who suggested that there should be some way of identifying or targeting poor households and supporting them to go to school. I don't believe that every single Ghanaian needs to have his or her child in school for free. There are many Ghanaians who can afford it and should pay for it. There are many Ghanaians who cannot afford it and should be assisted. But simply to make the system completely free, in my view, opens up many new challenges that cannot be solved. And the benefits to the system as a result of this free system cannot be seen to be much larger than the cost of it. The cost of it, as we've seen, is the decline in quality. It's important to accept that the decline in quality did not begin with free SHS, but free SHS is going to make it worse. It's going to make it worse for all the reasons that we've seen. The schools will never have the infrastructure that they need to perform at the right level. And because they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the teachers, and we can't afford to bring them in, the quality will suffer. It's inevitable. I mean, that's how life is structured. It's inevitable. So you want good schools, you spend money on them. You spend money on them, and different stakeholders must be doing the spending, not one actor. It cannot be only the state. The PPP approach cannot be applied uniformly, so proper criteria will have to be developed to aid in the selection and monitoring of who benefits and who does not benefit. So how do we deal with the poor teacher preparation? There are many things that have been proposed over the years by experts in education. They talk about a reward system that is tied to student performance. So if your students are doing well, you get better paid. And this is going to be reflected in things like a teacher upgrading, retooling. How do you support them? How do you enter into performance contracts? Is it possible to have performance contracts with teachers where we are able to say, if you are able to achieve X, Y, Z with your students, you get A, B, C. Bonuses could be paid. It can be well structured and properly managed to avoid abuses. Abuses are always very, very much present in Ghana. Sanctions for poor performance must be available. In rural areas, we must provide incentives to attract good teachers, so on. Yeah, these are things that can be done. They've been talked about before, but not really followed through. Then we talk about the time spent in SHS, whether it should be 3 years or 4 years. I say here that whether we make it 3 years or 4 years should not be a politically motivated decision. The PNDC, NDC regime kept a 3-year senior high school system. And then it was changed to 4 years by the Kufuor government. And then the Tamils Mahama government switched it back to 3 years. What was interesting in all the switches made was the fact that the only arguments made by one group or the other was largely politics. And I'm saying that there's enough evidence that we can find from good research that will tell us what will work. So in making that decision to avoid the politics, let international best practices guide us in our discussions. What kind of content would allow 15 to 16-year-old students in Ghana to be more competent and competitive? What we should be thinking about, how do we ensure that when 15-year-old Ghanaians take the teams, they will be doing as well as the Singaporeans or the Koreans or the Chinese or the Finns and Swedes and so on. How do we do that? That is what should be at the back of our minds. How do we get 15-year-old Ghanaians to be able to pass those exams as well as anybody else? Not run away from it. Let's not say, oh, because we are not doing well, we will not go for us to be embarrassed. And that's what I've heard many people say in the Ghana Education Service. The curriculum and its presentation should be more engaging and challenging. Here, we are talking about the use of appropriate technology. How do we get our students to have access to the kinds of equipment, the kind of infrastructure that students in Singapore or Korea have? Without that, there's no way we're going to compete with them. Without that, there's no way. We can build all the STEM schools we like. We can build all the STEM schools we like. But if they are not properly equipped, if they're not properly structured, if they don't have good teachers, it's a waste of money. And it's an important point that we need to make. So let us move away from the populist things that the number has gone from 0 to 15, and so we are doing well. There's a lot more to do than simply raising numbers. That's the point I want to make over here. So dealing with the governance challenges in the education sector, I say make GES more of a regulator of the school system and not a manager of the system. In doing that, it means that the board of a school should be the one that decides what teachers they want. It should be the board of the school that decides how many teachers they need. It should be the board that decides how many students will be admitted into a school. It should be the board that decides how many boarding houses do we need, and so on. Quite recently, I was at a board meeting at Achimota School, and I was horrified at the list of things that needed to be provided in order for the term to run properly. I was quite horrified by it, but it was also obvious to me that there was no way the Ghana Education Service was going to be able to provide even a half of the things required to run these schools, or this school. So let the school management run the schools supervised by their boards. Let the headmaster or the headmistress run the school, not the district director of education, not the regional director of education, but the school head with a good management team. That's the point I think Bukasa was also making. And then you supervise them using the board. Let the school boards be effective. Let the school boards govern the schools. Let the school boards have the right composition with alumni present, with all other interests present, the PTA and so on. But it's important that the school board is not held hostage by the education service, whether by the district director or the regional director. Today, many decisions taken by the board need to be ratified by the district director, by the regional director. It doesn't help anybody. And that is why the schools can't do what they are supposed to do. So, in conclusion, I say making the system effective will cost more money, which the government does not have. but it should lead to much better quality education to support more rapid national development. Ghana is not going anywhere soon if we don't do something about education. And we are not going to go anywhere with an educational system that seeks to keep people at a very low threshold. We are able to count the number of people who have been to school and then we are happy. No, it is what the people can do, whether working in agriculture, or working in medicine, working in the arts or whatever. What they can do is as important as the number. Yes, by all means, let us raise the numbers gently by making sure that those who have been through our school system are able to compete internationally, are able to compete with their peers around the world. Until we do that, we are not going to get much out of our system, and it's going to affect our future and the future of our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ayite. I guess the lecture was very comprehensive. We have some messages who have already been saying that the presentation is very, very informative and instructive, and that's a message coming from Christian. But there are also a number of questions there for you. So if you don't mind, I would like us to launch into the questions. But if any of you have questions and want to put the questions to Prof directly, that's also fine. Just use the icon button where you raise your hand, and then I will call you to ask your question. So Prof, there was a question earlier asked, and I predicted that it was more of an academic who would be able to answer this question better. The question reads, should free education be means tested by a capable board at the facility or school level? And then there was a similar question in relation to means testing, and it says, should means testing be used to reduce the cost of tuition to the government and the money saved channeled into improving the facilities and providing better quality of teachers and teaching material? So that was the question. Prof, are you willing to take those two? Then I'll call on Amwako Nwama, and then there's another person who's using a Galaxy Tab A. We'll pick those two, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I agree entirely with the person, or I believe strongly that means testing is I did mention that we need to target people, and the most appropriate way of targeting is doing a means test. So I don't have, but I also know that means tests can be very difficult and sometimes impractical. And so you've got to find ways of seeing what works best in our environment. One of the suggestions I've heard made by many different people is that instead of making SHS free for everybody, why don't you identify schools that will be free and identify schools that will not be free? So every parent knows that if I take my son or daughter to this school, it is free. If I take my son or daughter to that school, it is not free. So I have a choice. And then you create, even in those schools that are not free, you create the possibility through scholarships. That's what scholarships are meant for. You use scholarships to allow people who are not financially solid or financially sound to compete for slots in those areas. You know, for me, it is important that we are able to use the school system to pull everybody up, whether they are poor or non-poor. We are able to use the school system to bring them up gently. Today, what I see is like bringing everybody down to a particular level. It's like well, if we all cannot get to the top, let us bring everybody down. That's confirmed by the comments recently attributed to the Ministry of Education when he spoke about Wesley Girls and pre-sec admissions and so on. So it's important that we identify how best to assist
Thank you very much, Prof. So Mr. Amwakunwama or Madam Amwakunwama, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question, it's a comment, and I'll try not to make it too long. Excellent, Prof. Aite. As usual, nothing to be surprised about. Thank you very much. Your analysis, almost like you can't add anything else. But I need to say that all of us Ghanaians, we need to be more honest. We need to be more sincere with each other. Having been at the Ministry of Education and observing what happens there and afterwards, the ministry and GES must not think that they have the right to determine what is okay for all of us in Ghana as far as education is concerned. It is for everybody in Ghana to contribute. So we should stop politicizing, doing partisanship with our educational system, and for our children's sake and for our grandchildren's sake. What used to be okay for access and quality may not be so much so now because of the numbers that we are dealing with, because of the population increase and all that. So let us be more sincere and honest with all of ourselves. Supervision and monitoring is something that ought to be really improved. I think I'll be talking too long, so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christine Amwakunwama. Thank you very much for your contribution. And for those who may not know her, she's a former Minister for Science, Environment, and a former presidential advisor as well. And she was one person I was walking behind a staircase once. She wasn't holding the railings and I was, and she warned me that there's a lot of bacteria on railings. So when I'm walking up the stairs, I should avoid holding them. So that's my memory of her. Nice to connect with you again, Dr. Amwakunwama. Thank you. Now we have other questions who want to, those who've raised their hands, but I can't see any names. So I will have to ask, there's one person who's joined with a Galaxy Tab A, there's no name. If you can ask your question, then the other person has joined with the Galaxy A03S. So I'll start with Galaxy Tab A. Please introduce yourself and then you can contribute.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm grateful. My name is Albert Bavi, speaking from the Oti region. I would like, first of all, to thank Prof for that wonderful and insightful presentation. My question are these. One, may I know if this program or this presentation is going to get to the authorities who are in charge of our educational system and how it's going to influence their decisions they are making? Because I think things of this nature should get to them for them to know that there are real works that need to be done. So how will this program reach them and how will it have some influence on our system? Because if it is ending here only, then I think we will not be going far or be doing more work or impact on the system. So that's my first question. Two, as Prof rightly said,
let me just quickly answer that, sir. So the Center for Social Justice will compile the issues and the recommendations and we'll put it in a position paper and present it to the ministry. So that's how it will get to them, sir. Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you very much. It's a prayer fervently that they really take it into consideration, because a lot of suggestions are going, but they feel they are the only people who know a lot or have the expertise to run the educational system. So whenever things are brought to their attention, they just brush it off and they continue with the normal thing. And our systems are going down and down. We are sinking every now and then. The region I'm talking about, that I am coming from, my school in particular, our students complete every year, and about only 20% can even read and write from the senior high school. Meanwhile, they are always touting the program that it's a flagship program, it's turning out a greater number. Meanwhile, the quality is being watered down. Students cannot read and write at the end of a second cycle institution. So what are we doing? On that same campus I am teaching, the UDS is running a distance program, and most of these people who cannot read and write are doing such a program. So at the end of the day, they are pushed into the system back to train whose children, and what do we get? In fact, we are really, our hearts are bleeding for Mother Ghana in terms of education. And I don't know how we can really have these things solved. Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's also call on Godfred Asante, who has his hand up. Godfred, you can ask your question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I've joined this session from UK, the United Kingdom, and I'm very passionate about education as an educationist. I'm a lecturer at the Coventry University. I have been a product of Ghana Educational Services. I went through the old system that is known as CITO, from primary through middle school, up to the university. And then before I came to the UK for my postgraduate degree, and then I've been in the system, and then now lecturing at the uni. I was listening to Prof. Aite with keen interest, and how education, or the Ghana education, has evolved over the years. What I have observed and noticed is that the Ghana educational system seems to be politicized, in the sense that our governments, I don't know, probably for votes or for the sake of political interest, tend to tamper with the educational system without necessarily taking into consideration how important and then how the system will actually impact on the development of the economy, and then the individuals per se. There's one thing I want to find out, whether the people, in terms of when I say the people, I'm talking about the stakeholders of education in Ghana, have actually taken into consideration the cost of this new free SHS system, and how the running of it may also be impacting on the quality of education in Ghana. Because what I've noticed is that here in the UK, education, up to the higher education level or the high school level is free. But it's only free, at the point of day when you attend a day school, that is, going to school from home. If you want to go to boarding school, you have to pay. You have to pay for your feeding, and you have to pay for everything to do the education. It is the tuition that is free. I sometimes wonder, and how sustainable it's going to be for the Ghanaian government to continuously fund education from the primary up to the high school level, at a point of sponsoring even their feeding, the boarding, and everything. I don't see this to be sustainable. And I want the panel to please help us in this, as to whether there's something that, the stakeholders or the government need to face the reality on the ground, as to the possibility of making this sustainable. I think I'll rest my point. I've got other issues that I wanted to raise, but I'll give room for others to continue. But how is this going to be sustainable? That's my question. And then what is it that we are doing as stakeholders to help the government, to come to the reality that this isn't going to be sustainable? Because even in developed countries, in the US, in the UK, you hardly get, boarding schools being free. It is absolutely unsustainable. Thank you very much. Sorry, I think you're muted. I don't know if it's for me.
Yes, I am. Thank you. So I was saying that we'll now take your answers, Professor Aite. We have some questions in the chat box. I'll come to that after you're done with your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Gottfried's question basically was whether the free SHS involving largely a boarding system for students was sustainable. It depends on how you choose to look at sustainable. If you have no problem with the compromises that we've already made in terms of the quality, yes, you can you can keep it there and call it sustainable because you're able to keep the kids at school for 2 terms or 2 semesters, and then you are happy. That's fine. But by all means, it will come at a huge cost, the huge cost being the quality. And that is where the problem is. I agree with you that there's nowhere that you find kids in a boarding school for free, nowhere in the world, except in Ghana, that you find kids in a boarding school for free, because nobody can afford it. The whole world cannot afford it. So you got to find a way. We've got to find a way of determining who benefits from free education and who does not. And one of the things that you can do is say that the free provision should not extend to boarding schools. And if boarding schools are going to be not free, then there has to be a way of paying for those who cannot afford it. And there are many different ways of providing support to those who cannot afford it. That's where the means testing comes in and so on. By all means, nobody should be left behind. But you don't pursue nobody being left behind by bringing the entire system down. And that's what we seem to be doing here.
There's some questions here. Let me just read them. There was a question from the gentleman from the OT region. He had some concerns about, the investments made, the output, and the fact that still we have not very good quality still going into tertiary education and still coming out into the world of work. Hello, Prof.
Yes.
Yeah, I was asking about the question from the OT region. I think you missed that. The gentleman was concerned about the quality of.
Actually, I thought it was a comment.
Okay, more of a comment.
Yeah, it was more of a comment, which I agreed with. I mean, there's enough evidence. One of the things that we need to do is begin to do a careful, properly structured study of these things. We've heard Ruby's story today. There are many other stories. There are many different experiences that need to be documented. And once we begin to document these things, the evidence for change will be far too strong to ignore. And I think I will encourage CSJ to pursue a documentation of these experiences that we are sharing today and from many other places. We should encourage the academics or researchers who work in education to look into what it takes. You know, there are many things that we've talked about today that require solid research in order to answer questions that will provide evidence for policy change.
Thank you, Prof. So there's some questions. This one from Samson says, the PTA contribution should be seriously reconsidered. It has stifled the less endowed schools. It has to be a policy reorientation. I served on a school board and know this firsthand. There's a question here from Jane. It says, why isn't there a cap on the student population in the school? This is very serious. Prof, is that something that's achievable? A cap on student population when we're trying to follow the policy of giving access?
Yeah, I understand Jane's question perfectly, and I have sympathy for putting caps. I mean, the only reason why you're not going to put caps is that you are far less concerned about the quality than you are about creating access. So in a situation where making sure that you can count a growing number of kids in school is more important than showing that the kids' performance is on the rise. Putting a cap will not be politically expedient. So that's why it's not going to happen. Schools are being forced to take in thousands of students every year. When we know that the resources of this, I mean, you look at the boarding house space, you know that that school cannot have more than 2,000 kids, and yet you force 4,000 kids into their school. You know that classrooms that you have cannot contain more than 2,000, and yet you have put 4,000 kids in the school. It is not the schools that are deciding on how many kids they want. It is the GES that determines that. So,
all right.
it's not, so the GES is not going to put a cap.
Okay, this sounds more like a comment. It says the quality of Ghanaian education will suffer greatly if urgent action isn't taken to give students enough contact hours. Let's not play politics with the education of our students. This one asks, please, how can we stamp out exam leakages and cheating in examinations in Ghana? I don't know how we got here as a nation. Well, I'm not sure if that's part of the main discussion, but Prof, is that a major challenge in the current dispensation?
Exam malpractice has been with us for many, many, many years. It happens largely because of a breakdown in the governance system. It happens because there's a lot of corruption. It happens because the education system is our passing examination. It's not about properly being educated. And in that system, you do anything to pass your exams. It becomes a lot easier when it's difficult to govern or run a school. And when you lost control over your teachers, when you've lost control over the kids, yes, it becomes easier. So until you get to a point where you've taken away the incentive, you've taken away the incentive to cheat, you've taken away the incentive to be corrupt, I'm afraid we're going to be dealing with that.
Thank you, Prof. So just to let everyone know that we've now been joined as well by Ruby Charlene Opoku. We'll hear from her shortly, but two people have had their hands up, so I'd like to give them a chance to answer to ask their questions. Jane Ogunro and Engineer Vince are on. I'll start with Jane. Jane, please go ahead with your question, and then Engineer Vince can go ahead as well.
Thank you very much. I'm actually Akora Jane Chapman Yahoo. That's my maiden name. So my question here is, what influence / stranglehold does the GES controllers have on private schools? Perhaps we should have many more private schools like GES Lincoln, but affordable with high standards. So I'm thinking more or imagining more in terms of like a franchise of private schools, with high standards, but affordable. And because they're private, they are in control and also have access to funding by having a team of people who go out expressly into the world looking for the kind of finances or financing that would help maintain that level or standard of education, which is so much desired. So I'm just wondering, I'm being very, I tend to be very innovative. So it's like, okay, can we be creative and maybe have, you know, these private affordable schools?
All right. Engineer Vince, please ask your question. Thank you. Hello, Engineer Vince, have you gone offline? Okay, if anyone else wants to ask a question, please, you may do so now before I go to the other questions.
Yes, my question was addressed to Professor Aite.
Yes, he'll answer it. I
possibility.
just want to take like 2 or 3, and then
Yes.
he can answer all at a stretch.
Oh,
so I just
you.
wanted to know if there was anyone else. If there isn't, then I can let him answer then. Okay, Prof, I think you can answer Accra Jane Chapman's question.
Let me answer Jane's question here. Again, there's nothing wrong with having more private schools in the system. I don't think the private schools should replace the public schools. You need more good schools in the system. So by all means, let us encourage the competition from the private sector, and I'm all for it. I know where you're coming from when you talk about a franchise. I've heard many people talk about the need to privatize some of the schools that we have by inviting private participation and so on, and bringing some private capital. And that is something that is worth considering. There's one thing though that I would like to see. You know, with the way we are managing the school system today, where we decide, when I say we, I'm talking about the Ghana Education Service and the Ministry of Education deciding that when you go to some type of schools, you are no longer eligible to go to what they call the grade A schools. What is going to happen is there will be many new SOSs, TISs, GISs created. There'll be many of them coming up. And they'll be coming up because there'll be a demand for their type of education by the middle class. So the kids that would have gone to Wesley Girls or Infantsipim or Achimota School or Presec or whatever will instead be going to these new private schools. The Achimotas and the Presecs and the Adisados and so on will be completely taken over by a completely different set. What is going to happen then is a new class war where you have the private versus the public. A new class war where if you are the University of Ghana, you make rules that make it difficult for students who have gone to private schools to enter, because you must fill the place with the kids that you put through secondary school for free. And so then what happens? You will have a new type of Ashesi University come up, and many more of them to take care of the kids going to the private schools. That is going to lead to a future where your status is determined whether you went to a private school or you went to a public school. A time will come when if you didn't go to a private school here, then you went to school abroad. You went to school in the US, or you went to school in the UK or somewhere. That's going to happen. And then when that happens, you will find that many of our institutions will be hiring people depending on whether they had the education overseas or not. That is how class wars begin. And I do hope that we can fix the problem here without necessarily beginning that class war. I am all for private involvement in a place like in some of our grade A schools. I'm all for it, but I don't believe that we are ready for privatizing them yet. I believe that we are in a position where we can bring private capital in there, making parents pay, bringing investors in who are assured of returns and so on. Yes, I'm all for that. But I don't want to see a future where every school is like SOS, or every school is like GIS, or every school is like TIS.
Okay, I hadn't even thought about it from the perspective of it creating class wars, right? Because my focus was more on this enabling by making the fees, affordable, or being very creative about the fees, enabling even the lower income people to go to get a quality education, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So
I understand it perfectly.
Scholarships, right?
Yeah.
By giving
Yeah.
lots of scholarships.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's not as if we're creating a class war. That doesn't even come on my agenda. I wasn't even thinking of class wars and the possibility of it creating class wars. But for me, to be able to reach those children who cannot afford, the education at that price, but still be able to give them the high standard quality education that the GIS is. So in fact, I guess my quote unquote franchise would rather be competing with the GISs and the Lincolns. They may be angry because this woman is now able to give the same quality education as we. However, she's able to attract people who cannot afford our fees, if you see what I mean.
Sure, I understand. I understand it perfectly. I mean,
Prof, maybe you are even late to the party on the class wars, because I can tell you that it has certainly begun. There are many who are critical of political leaders or senior accomplished people because they can afford to take their children to some of these private schools. I'm told in the University of Ghana, if you go to any of these schools, if you come to the University of Ghana, you pay as a foreign student. And the question is, we're also being unfair to such individuals because you're keeping them out deliberately so. And then apart from that, there are many middle-class people who are opting out of a system they don't believe in, even though they can't afford it. They are borrowing to put their kids through these schools. So it's actually begun that much.
There's no doubt in my mind that, and it could get worse. If you look at my presentation, I spoke about the need for private participation.
Yes.
So I'm all for it. All I'm saying is we've got to be very careful in the way we do it, so it does not lead to the class war. We've got to be careful. So I want us as a nation to be able to develop a very, very competitive school system, one in which you have choice. You choose whether you're going to a public school or you're going to a private school. It's a choice you make. And in making that choice, you are looking at what is on offer. And then so you are not forced into a system simply because that's the only thing available. I want to see a school system in which choice is very, very much available, and the system is such that it pulls up everybody, rich or poor. It pulls up everybody. If we are not careful, it pulls everybody down, and those who don't want to be pulled down then opt out. When they opt out, what they take would then lead to the class war.
All right, let's take Mr. Bennett, who's had his hand up. Mr. Bennett, please, can you ask your question? Thank you. Mr. Bennett, are you on with us? I saw your hand up. All right, so yeah, go ahead.
Hello. Oh, sorry, I lost the connection for a moment. So my name is Yao Bennett Ampansa, and I serve on the OA, on the academic subcommittee of the OA. There are things, of all the things that we've discussed, there are things that could be done in the short term, and I know Prof. Aite touched on the governance issues. Right now, the GES is both the regulator of basic education in Ghana and also the operator. So essentially, the GES is marking its own script. If the school boards and management were to be empowered to actually run the schools, then the GES could focus on being the regulator, setting standards, compliance, inspections, stuff like that. And we should see an immediate improvement in the performance of schools if we are able to set up such an accountable system. In the medium term, we could then do the means testing. Or in fact, it's more urgent than that, and I think it's simpler to do. Currently in Ghana, the welfare system that we have, LEAP, is based on means testing. Even the SNIT loans that tertiary students get, especially based on means testing. So it's not an alien concept. And you can build an economic profile of any adult Ghanaian by looking at mining the government's own databases, right? Looking at a combination of databases, tax records, NHIS, land title registry, DVLA, Ghana card. If you take all of these databases, you're going to find every adult Ghanaian in at least 3 or 4 of them and build a reasonable economic profile of that person and judge whether a child coming out of that household deserves a scholarship or not. So we make it seem like it's some difficult, unattainable process, but it shouldn't be.
Thank you very much.
Having said that,
okay.
Sorry, in the short term, let's deal with the governance issues. If that should be something that we can deal with very quickly, and then we can deal with the economic issues as well in terms of the financing of education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yao-Bene, for that. Please note that there's a survey monkey that has been put into the chat box. Please take a bit of time to fill it in. It will give us a view about the program, what worked well for you, what can be improved, and anything or any other suggestion you would like to provide. So we are in the last embers of this discussion, but we have some messages. So let me read them. Someone asked, moderator, can the recording of the session be shared with those interested? If this is possible, please share to my email, which the person provides. So the CSJ team will make the link available to each and every one of us so that we can watch the session again on our downtime. And so that's what will be done. Let me see, I think I saw 1 or 2 questions. Okay, then this one says, great presentation. I joined a bit late, but the little I heard is profound. Prof stated that, quote, the decline in education quality did not begin with free SHS, but free SHS will make it worse. This is a profound comment, but I'm wondering how giving education access to a lot more people, especially poor people, will lead to a decline in quality. Is the problem with the free SHS of that quality, or is about the sustainable funding? Yes, Prof, if you can answer that.
It's about the many kids in the schools not having access to what they need in order to be able to perform at the right level. So putting them in the school is a good thing, but not giving them the right type of education cannot be in their interest. There are some who tell you that giving people bad education is probably worse for them than no education. I'm not the way we stand on that one, but clearly, if we can increase the numbers and improve on the quality, that's what we should be aiming for. But where increasing the numbers comes only at the cost of quality, we should be careful.
Thank you, Prof. So let me call on Ruby Charlene. Ruby, we watched your video earlier on. We're told that you'll be joining much later. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to hear what's been said so far and some of the comments in the chat box. I think your experience resonated for many who are concerned about the numbers, concerned about the erratic nature of the school calendar, concerned about the limited infrastructure and the opportunities therein for students to do well. Is there anything more you would like to leave us with? Hello, Charlene. Hello, Charlene.
Hello.
Yes, yeah, go ahead. Yes, hello, Charlene. Ruby? Okay, looks like we're not able to connect properly with Ruby Charlene. So I'll ask. Okay, are you ready now?
Yes, please.
Are you ready now?
Yes, please.
I asked, you were supposed to have joined us earlier. You've heard a lot of all's been said. Is there anything else you would like to say before we wrap up the session?
I hope that in the policy paper that will be sent to the government, they encourage them once again to take into consideration the quality aspect of their VSHS policy, because it really needs to be reviewed and quality needs to be restored, because the VSHS policy as at now, it's very terrible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlene. And Prof, just one final comment. The problems persist because of the unwillingness of the decision makers to engage with divergent opinions. If you're not saying an unqualified yes to their policies, they don't want to hear from you. So thank you very much to everyone that sent a message, or those of you who asked your questions directly. Many thanks to you, Professor Ayite, for that very insightful presentation based on data and research. Much appreciated, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, and as we wrap up now, I'd like to call on Stephen Kemeche, who is a member of the CSJ Council, to give the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Hello, Tifa. Yeah, thank you very much, Tifa, for that. That was brilliant from you, and thank you for agreeing to anchor this session for CSJ. Just to recap some of the things I heard, Ruby said that there is a need for review. Bokassa said that quality has certainly been affected, and the numbers are unsustainable. Prof. or Foster, Dr. Foster is ready to pay, and I think that is that is key to hear from parents. And then also Prof. Wondered if government, or actually said categorically, that government alone is unable to do the investment that is needed to be able to give quality education, and therefore there is a need for partnership with all the stakeholders. So this is to say a big thank you to all our panelists, to Ruby, to Foster, and to Bokassa, and Prof, to yourself. That was brilliant from all of you. And then for all the participants, thank you for logging in. You've been with us for well over 2 hours. We are grateful. And for all those who contributed, we are grateful. My colleagues, CSJ colleagues, thank you as well. As indicated, the recording will be available on the CSJ social media sites, YouTube and Facebook, for you to make reference to at any point in time. Also to give you one more information, CSG has just completed a debt sustainability study of the Ghanaian economy. And we will be coming out very soon announcing the day we'll be out during that report. So it's something that you should be looking up for. It will be coming soon. So we'll be calling you again. Again, as indicated, what we normally do is we compile all of these suggestions into a position paper. Previous ones we've presented to the ministry concerned and then to the presidency, and actually even had meetings with the chief of staff on same. So we are going to follow suit with this one as well. So you can well be assured that your suggestions or all the details presented in this session will reach the ears of the policymakers. With that, thank you once again. Thank you for coming. Have a great evening.